Hi, and welcome to Off the Shelf, your inside look at the Wayne County Public Library. I'm Miriam, your friendly neighborhood librarian, and today we have a bunch of fun segments for you. So watch as we take you behind the scenes of our Technical Services Department, show you a staff picks video, and take you out into the community. I hope you enjoy the show. Let's get started. I hope you enjoy this behind-the-scenes look of our Technical Services Department with Tanea, the Technical Services Manager.
And I'll be showing you around a little bit. Basically, materials begin their library lives here in TS. We are responsible for ordering, cataloging, and processing all library materials here in our department. We make it possible for library users and staff to acquire and access materials and ensure they are described and organized so that everyone can find them. Our department is comprised of 3 functional areas: acquisitions, cataloging, and processing. Here is a visual of the basic workflow, and we'll briefly discuss what each step entails. So once our selectors choose the items that they would like added to the collection, our acquisition assistants place the orders through various vendors and upload order records into our system. When the orders are received, they also handle the unpacking and receiving of the items. You will often, when you come into our department, see a pile of boxes when entering the department, and so those are normally boxes that are waiting to be unpacked. Once they have unpacked and received the item, they're also placing slips in each item, which includes some basic information: title, author, library, location, price, etc. The items are then put on carts, and the carts are typically passed on to our cataloger. We do have some items that are pre-processed. These are bestsellers and popular fiction that are in demand and go straight to processing so that we can get them out to you much faster. Next, we're going to talk about the cataloging of materials. The carts with nonfiction, juvenile, small vendor books, and other materials are now ready to be cataloged. At this point, items are call numbered, catalog records are checked to ensure there are complete bibliographic records, and requests are sent to our consortium headquarters, CleveNet, if any updates or changes are needed. Call numbering and the reviewing of records is most often done by our cataloger, but may also be handled by an acquisitions assistant or myself, depending on complexity. The call number for each item is written on the back of the item slip, and once complete, carts are placed in queue to be processed. We're here where our technical services assistant processes the items. You can see that each of them have a cart that they are currently working on. At this point, our assistants add the items to our catalog, and barcodes and other labels are added to each item. They do a final review of the catalog records and cover books as needed. We also have department volunteers who help us with covering. They work at the processing table over here. Before new items leave our department, they are all double-checked for accuracy. They are then sent off to their new happy library homes where they either fulfill holds or are placed on the shelves. On average, the Technical Services Department adds 4,200 new items to the collection each month. Technical Services is also responsible for mending library materials, ordering supplies, maintaining the branch rotating collection, overall maintenance of the catalog, maintenance of periodical subscriptions, and other duties and projects as they arise. I hope you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes look at Technical Services and what we do to get our items out to you as quickly as possible. Thanks for stopping by.
This is the library's new MakerGear M3 3D printer. What you see it printing with right now is a plastic filament called PLA, which stands for polylactic acid. It's made out of renewable resources like tapioca and cornstarch and is completely compostable. Yet, it's sturdy and strong enough to make industrial parts. The 3D printer works by feeding the filament through the extruder, or the nozzle. The nozzle heats up, melting the plastic, allowing it to be redeposited in any formation that the computer directs it to. Within minutes, the plastic will harden into a firm, new shape. The plastic is deposited layer by layer, each building on the last, until finally you have a complete whole. As an example, we're going to print out a fox statuette today. Here you can see, in this software, Simplify 3D, the 3D rendering of the file, what it's going to look like. We've put a webcam on the end of the 3D printer and made a time-lapse video so you can see, beginning to end, the creation of this fox. Wasn't that neat? We've got something out of nothing. If you're interested in learning more about 3D printers, check the calendar of your local Wayne County Public Library branch. We're going to be doing Introduction to 3D Printing at all 7 branches in the month of April. Hope to see you there!
Are you looking for a good book? Well, enjoy this new Staff Picks video. Hello, and welcome to the Wayne County Staff Picks. Today we have a lot of great staff picks for you, and so we're going to get started.
My name is Naomi. I'm a children's librarian, and I'm talking about Pocket Full of Colors, about Mary Blair. It was written by Amy Guillermo, Jacqueline Torville, and it was illustrated by Bridget Barriger. And it is about Mary Blair. Most people are probably not familiar with her, but you've probably seen her art before. She worked at the Disney Studios a lot in the 1940s and 50s, and she was instrumental in the color design of many of the classic movies. And she also designed the It's a Small World ride, so apologies if you have that song stuck in your head right now. She wasn't tied to the studio. She also spent time illustrating children's books and doing a lot of other cool stuff artistically. So, this book draws on her expressive and bold use of color. There's an end note that says, an artist who worked with her noted that she never really mixed colors. She just full-on wanted to give you a pop of color. So, they use the color names all throughout the text. So you don't just talk about blue, you talk about cornflower. You don't talk about black, she talks about charcoal. So it's really gorgeous, and my favorite spread takes place when she is in South America. Walt Disney took a group of artists to South America in the 1940s, and her art was so cool that he decided to give her more responsibilities once they got back to the States. So there's a really gorgeous explosion of rainbow colors all over this one page that is awesome. So we have other picture book biographies, not just about Mary Blair. We have ones about people that you may know, like John Deere or Ada Lovelace, Dr. Seuss. It's a kind of growing market right now in children's book publishing, so stay tuned for more of those.
So, Naomi, did Mary Oliver, was she behind any particular movies that Disney did?
Mary Blair did concept art for a lot of the ones in the 50s, like Peter Pan, Cinderella, anything with kind of odd colors like green mermaids or teal pumpkins has her fingerprints all over it.
Not the Black Cauldron.
Not the Black Cauldron.
Hello, hi, I'm Miriam, and today I'm going to talk about The Martian by Andy Weir. And this book takes place in the year 2035 when 6 NASA astronauts from the U.S. are on a Mars mission, but their mission gets scrapped only after 6 days. And they're on their way back to the MAV, which is going to take them up to the space shuttle, the Hermes, when the communications antenna breaks loose and hits one of the astronauts, Mark Watney, and his entire crew thinks that he's dead, so they leave him. However, Mark Watney is not dead. So Mark has to improvise his entire life right there and then, and he has to save himself because he's injured, and then he has to figure out how he's going to survive all by himself alone on Mars, and he has no way of getting in contact with NASA. So he decides to start growing potatoes, which luckily NASA has sent up there because the crew was supposed to be there over Thanksgiving, and he starts rationing and figuring out, how he's going to get in contact with NASA. Unfortunately, NASA's already had a funeral for him, but they realized after a month their mistake that Mark is actually alive. So they're scrambling about how to get supplies to him, which would take about a year, and the next Mars mission isn't until in the next 4 years. So the story is about the human race coming together to bring home one person from Mars, and it's about fixing one problem after the next, and Mark has to fix one problem after the next because it's just one thing after the next. So this book is great. It's really funny. The science is not hard to understand. It's actually, really easy to understand, and it's just really suspenseful and adventurous, and I think you'll really, really like it.
Did you see the movie?
Oh yes, I love the movie. It was so good. Normally, I'm very picky about the movie, book to movie adaptations, but this one was really good. Of course, they left stuff out, but they did a really great job with the things that that happened to Mark, and they did a great job of portraying it. And they actually used a lot of people from NASA, like Ridley Scott, the director. She used a lot of people from NASA to, or at least one person, to make sure everything was as accurate as possible. So I think the guy who helped her, he definitely said that the movie looked like it would be an actual mission to Mars. So, but I thought it was fantastic. I loved it.
Hi, my name is Nick Starr. I'm a children's librarian at the library, and today I'm going to talk about Neil Gaiman's book of Norse mythology that he wrote. It's a collection of some of the stories from Norse mythology that he collected over about 8 years that he went back and revisited, and his publishers finally harassed him into actually publishing the book. He provides a really good introduction about explaining how he fell in love with the Norse mythology stories from reading the Marvel comics as a kid and reading about Thor, who is nothing like the ginger, bearded, farting, belching, not the brightest person in Norse mythology, and kind of goes and brings those stories to life, and he tells it in his own voice, so it's not really a dry telling, it's very much in Neil Gaiman's voice. So he's also written American Gods, Coraline, Good Omens, The Graveyard Book, and a number of other stories. So it's very much told in his tone of voice. So they're really funny for what some of the stories are, and some of them are actually pretty sad, more so than the other versions I've ever read. But he also kind of introduces at the beginning, kind of very vaguely, the different lands like Ginnungagap and Yggdrasil, and mostly focuses on Odin, Loki, and Thor as the three main kind of most important characters in Norse mythology. So the stories that he picks to retell in this collection are mostly about them. And I was fortunate enough to go see Neil Gaiman live a couple weeks ago, and he was reading a couple of stories from this. So I went back onto Hoopla and was listening to the audio version that he reads of it. And he does a really good job of reading these stories too. So if you are able to go through Overdrive or Hoopla, I would also recommend actually going and listening to him read, because he does a phenomenal job of reading these stories.
Neil Gaiman did say that he always tests sticks now, because in the Marvel comic, like the first Marvel comic, the guy, some weird doctor, is wandering around and gets stuck in a cave. So in the comic, he picks up like a stick for some reason and like bangs it against the cave, and it turns into Mjolnir, and he magically turns into Thor. And like ever since he was a kid and he read that, he always picks up sticks and like taps them on something to see if he's...
You know, I would be interested in how the writers of those comics first latched on to Norse mythology, because Greek and Roman mythology were pretty commonly a part of school curriculum, but not necessarily Norse mythology.
And we have more connections. Thor in the comics isn't like Asgard Thor, like Mrs. Thor.
It's not Chris Hemsworth?
No, like he has ginger hair and he farts and burps and he's dumb.
That's, okay, I have ginger hair, but none.
So there's two gingers here.
Like he's not beautiful, long, golden locks, you know.
So how is the Marvel movies, how are they different from actual Norse mythology? Just briefly.
They're mostly different. I mean, they get like the basic points, like Thor does have Mjolnir, the hammer, Odin loses an eye. Loki, like the relationship, which is kind of like in all mythology, is kind of wishy-washy. Like there's like no very clear, like this person is obviously this relation to that. Like Neil Gaiman kind of has Loki being almost more of a sibling to Odin, rather than in like the Marvel comics, Thor and Loki are brothers or adopted brothers. But they kind of hit like the main points, and they at least use a lot of the terms the right way. So for as vague as mythology can be, they do a decent job. But Thor isn't like Norse mythology Thor. He's not the long, beautiful hair, and isn't really what Thor is ever depicted in the books. Or in Norse mythology, he's always fairly dumb and just likes running around and hitting things. Like he's very like macho man who doesn't think about things, and when he gets his hammer, he likes banging stuff and throwing it, which isn't really how he's portrayed in the comics. They try to make him a little more regal.
Hi, I'm Diana Rice. I'm a children's librarian here, and I'm going to tell you about Undefeated, Jim Thorpe and the Carlisle Indian School football team by Steve Schenken. It's a book that was written with young people in mind, upper elementary aged to adult. I loved the book. And if you think you know about Jim Thorpe or Pop Warner, you'll be interested in this book, and definitely, if you're interested in football and history, you'll enjoy this book. It takes place primarily in the 20 years before and after the year 1900, in the early days of football, and in the early days of our country when there were Indian boarding schools. At that time, when football was new, it was a very violent game. Imagine that. But more violent even than we think of football today. In fact, slugging was allowed. It's a big part of the game. You didn't stop a play until a player was not moving anymore. And you can stop him from moving in any way, including punching him. The Carlisle Indian School students, they wanted a football team. They wanted to compete with other schools, but their director, Captain Pratt, didn't want them hurt. Football was so violent in 1905, for instance, that one season, 19 football players died. Eventually, Captain Pratt came around and he decided it would be good publicity for his school if he had a football team and he could take those people out on the road. They had to go out on the road because they didn't really have a field. And he agreed when the students came and asked him if we could have a football team. He said yes, but there were two requirements. One, you could not slug the other team, even though that was a big part of the game at the time. You could not physically interact by punching any player of the opposite team. And the second thing was, within 2 to 4 years, they had to beat the big 4 teams at the time. They were mostly East Coast, Princeton, Yale, and Harvard. This was in the early 1900s. And this little Indian school football team, he told them, sure, you can have a football team, you just have to beat the big ones. So they decided that they would give it a shot. Jim Thorpe doesn't show up in this book and at the Carlisle Indian School until a few years later, about 8 years later, when he's 15 years old. He knows all about Indian boarding schools. He's been in a couple of them. And he knows all about the football team because in just 8 years, they have beaten at least one of the big 4 and really made a name for themselves in intercollegiate football teams and scores and play. He comes roaring in to Carlisle Indian School. Not really. The first time he does something athletic, he's walking off the field, farming field, in his overalls, and he sees some people jumping over this thing. He says, what are you doing? And they said, it's a high jump, but we've got it up to this height and nobody can jump over it. And he says, I'll give it a try. In his overalls and his farm boots, walking right off the farm field, he leaps right over the bar that was set for the high jump. That starts his career in track, and a couple years later, he decides he wants to play on the football team. He's almost 6 foot tall, and he weighs a whopping 140 pounds. And Coach Pop Warner says, you can't play football, you're my track star. And he says, just watch me. If anybody else on the team can take me down and hurt me, I won't play. Twice, Pop Warner lines up everybody else on the team and tries to get them to catch Jim Thorpe as he's carrying the football, running down this muddy football field they have. Nobody else can catch him, and he's on the team. And I'm going to stop telling you about this book because it is so exciting, and there are so many great stories in here about individual football games, like the time in 1911 when 40,000 people showed up, more than the crowd at the World Series, to watch Harvard play the Carlisle Indian School football team. 50 Harvard players suited up to Carlisle's 16. Guess who won the game? I'm not going to tell you. You'll love this book.
We have kind of a movie theme going on with all of our books here. Has there been a movie about Jim Thorpe?
There actually is an old movie called Jim Thorpe All-American. I think Burt Lancaster played Jim Thorpe at that time. So.
What other sports did Jim Thorpe do?
Jim Thorpe is also well known for winning 2 gold medals in the 1912 Olympics in the pentathlon and the decathlon, really easy events. He also went on to play professional baseball and professional football. In fact, He was the first president of what became the National Football League.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
Is he in the Hall of Fame?
I'm pretty sure he's represented
Somewhere.
in Canton. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much for watching the Staff Picks program for today. We hope you enjoy some of these picks. Make sure you take a look at our branch and main libraries and check these books out. They're also available on Hoopla and Overdrive. Thanks again.
Your library is part of the community. Check out our work with the Wooster Community Hospital.
Hi, I'm Jeannie from Wayne County Public Library in Wooster, and I'm so happy to work in the Adult Services Department there. We have many programs that are available for patrons to participate in them, and one of those is Crafting for a Cause. And with Crafting for a Cause, we reach out into the community and we supply folks with things that they need. It came to our attention that the Women's Pavilion at Wooster Community Hospital needed newborn caps like this one. So between patrons and library employees, we were so happy to provide the Women's Pavilion with 123 newborn baby hats back in January. And I'm so happy to be here live at the hospital with Tara Roundabaugh, who is the manager of the Women's Pavilion. And we're presenting her with one hat today.
Well, like Jeannie said, in January they donated 123 hats for our newborns, and we so appreciate the community involvement with our families. Some families don't receive anything handmade and maybe never will, and this just shows, these were made with love. That's obvious. Look at how beautiful. Each hat was unique and made differently, and it's fun to hand out to families. So we just really appreciate the kind gesture from Crafting with a Cause.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Upcycling with Arlene.
Hi, my name is Arlene, and I'm going to show you how you can make an e-reader cover out of an old book. So the first thing you're going to need is, if you have an e-reader that doesn't have a cover and you want something to protect it, so this will be a good project for you. First thing you'll need to do is find an old book that you don't want anymore. And then you also have to make sure that it is the right size for your e-reader. It can be a little bit bigger, and that's not a problem, but it can't be smaller than your e-reader. All right, so you're going to now dismantle the book because you want the cover, you don't want this portion of the book. Now don't worry, we'll recycle this portion so it won't go to waste. So the first thing you need to do is pull the book portion away from the spine. So you kind of got to pull on it a little bit. And then once you get it away and the glue loose, you can take an X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors. Now be very careful at this portion because they are sharp, and just run it down along the edge of the spine there, and it should just pull away. So I have removed the book portion from the cover. The next thing you'll need is you will need a piece of fleece. It's just a nice soft fabric. This is a scrap we have. So we're going to take the cover and lay it on the fleece and just trace around because you want the fleece to be the same size as the cover. So we're just going to use a Sharpie and we're just going to trace along so we have an idea of where to cut. All right, now we have a piece of fleece that fits nicely in the book. What we're going to do next is there's a piece of elastic that runs through the book to hold it closed. So we're going to make the holes, and what we're going to use is this leather punch. And it does take some power, but you just put wherever you want the hole, you just squeeze, and you can feel it kind of going through the book, and you can see it too. And it might take a couple times to get all the way through the book. All right. So now we have our two holes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some
fabric glue. What you want is a permanent adhesive fabric glue that will adhere to cardboard, wood, just an all-purpose, fast-drying adhesive. And don't forget in the center there. And then just do some zigzags back and forth, a little bit in the center, so that you have good coverage of glue. Take the piece of fabric and lay it down on your book cover. Sort of just push it in so that you feel that glue take a hold of that fabric. Let this dry for a little while before you go on with the next step. We've given it a little time to dry. Now you'll notice that by putting the fabric on, I've covered the hole, so I won't be able to put the elastic through. So I'm going to go ahead and take my leather punch again, and actually this time punch the fabric and try and get a little hole there. There, I felt it snap. You may have to take a needle or something, but I did make a hole there. So you can see the hole. All right. So I'm going to take this elastic. It's a fold-over elastic. I purchased this through Amazon. It's a nice stretchy elastic, but it's a little bit thinner than typical elastic so that I can thread it through a needle to get it through those holes. So I'm going to take about 12 to 15 inches of that and just cut that off. And then I'm going to fold it over and thread it through my yarn needle. And it's a little tight, but it will go through, as you can see. Now I'm going to take that elastic and go out the top hole and back in the bottom hole. And it will pull through. So you've got your end there, and then we're going to come back in this one here. And since it's so stretchy, it doesn't matter how tight it is. And then I'm just going to tie this in a square knot. So now what I'm going to do is you have to make it so that you can attach your e-reader to the device, but you don't want it permanent. So what I'm going to use are these Velcro tabs. Now one way I think that's good to do it is to go ahead and put your loops in 4 little areas there, 4 spots. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the hook portion and I'm just going to lay it on top of the loops. And the reason I do that is because then what I can do is I can take my e-reader and just push it down onto those circles. You have to let the, I think it says 15 minutes to let the sticky tab adhere before you try and pull it off. But push it down good and then you're ready to go because you can close your e-reader cover, flip the elastic over, and you're ready to go. You have your homemade e-reader cover.
If you're looking for more information about books, programs, or events, you can check us out at our Facebook page or our website. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you here at the Wayne County Public Library.
I love the library for the opportunities that it gives us to pursue the things that we're interested in. We've been coming to the Dalton Storytime for about 7 years, and my kids always look forward to it. And I like that it encourages them to enjoy reading.